Hi, welcome to Personality Crisis, the podcast no one asked for, but you're getting anyway. I'm John Cole. I'm here with Mr. Doug J, aka New York Times Pitchbot, Oliver Willis, and then Mr. Bix. And we're going to spend an hour with Oliver talking about a number of different things. So, welcome to the podcast, Oliver. And anything you'd like to say?
No, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
And a special guest. Who is our special guest?
This is Kal-El, the wiener dog of infinite justice.
The wiener dog of infinite justice. What a sweet boy. All right, Oliver, the name of the show is Personality Crisis. So what we've spent like the last couple of weeks is talking to people about what drives these people and what makes them tick on the right. But as we were talking before we started recording, my first memories of you were in the early 2000s, and your starting points for any debate were, one, the Republicans are evil, and two, Democrats, what the fuck are we doing? And there were a few years where that, in the middle part of the last 2 decades, that cleared up a little bit, but now we seem to be back to where we started.
Yeah.
And so instead of talking about the sociopaths on the right, let's talk about this. I don't know how to describe it other than a chronic mental illness, because they are stuck in a completely different era and do not realize. And that was reminded of that today when Clyburn endorsed Cuomo.
Yeah,
So
one of the ongoing ideas I've had is that sometime in 1984, basically Democrats got frozen in time. And basically they saw the Reagan landslide, and ever since then have not learned a single lesson ever since. And they continue to act like that. And the weird thing is that there's a lot of Democrats that, it's not just the older folks. Like, sometimes I think people sometimes automatically say it's the older folks that have this problem, but I think it's something affecting even the younger folks that have grown up under these people like Jeffries, and even younger Democrats that have sort of grown up with this mindset of, we're in a constant defensive crouch. It's always 1984. Ronald Reagan's about to hit a landslide. And so you have to act in this way of, like, we're afraid of Republicans. This is a conservative country. This is, a center right to almost like super right wing country. And you would think that, like, in that, in between period, that Bill Clinton didn't serve 2 terms as president. Barack Obama didn't serve 2 terms. Joe Biden had a pretty strong win in 2020. Even though their own party has won sometimes and progressive things win all the time, they still act like it's, Reagan is just about to like crush them in, every state but, DC, and it's insane, but that's how they act. And I think it's
I am old enough to remember 1984, the election, and I think, isn't that when the soccer moms started to become a thing? Or was that later?
No, that was later. It was mostly I think it was like the religious right, that was their first election, and then the soccer mom stuff I think was closer to like Bush times, really. Like,
Uh,
Bush 1 leading up to Bush 2 was like the security moms, if you remember that.
but it's the same groups. We just keep giving them different names.
Yeah.
The security moms, the soccer moms, the suburban moms, the same. Keep giving them the same names over and over again.
Yeah, it's based on this idea, I think this Clinton era idea of, we can just divvy up people into these little groups, and you sort of, I've written about this before, where you have these like little levers, and if you just tweak the levers a little bit, you can win an election, but that's not how elections work in this country. Like, at least in my opinion.
Do you have any thoughts on the New York election?
I mean, I'm not optimistic about it. Like, I feel like Cuomo's probably going to win. And even if he doesn't win, it's kind of gross how all the sort of, New York and national Democratic establishment is lining up behind this guy who is, a piece of crap. And, you know, uh, Me Too was supposed to cancel him, and he's like yet another person that Me Too hasn't canceled. But the fact that he's like a Democratic, former governor and gonna be, I guess, another crappy Democrat mayor of New York. Like, I'm not optimistic.
Yeah, I keep trying to give myself hope by saying, well, at least we know that Cuomo hates Trump. So at least we've
Maybe,
got that. You know,
like maybe that's the thing. Maybe that's it. I wouldn't be surprised to see him like pull a Fetterman. Like it just like I would not put any hope into Cuomo. Like he's a slimy character. His brother's a slimy character. They're not like their father at all. Like these are guys that just want power and influence. And his brother, who was on CNN and he's now on like the second tier or third tier of cable news, is the same kind of figure where they just like they like power and influence. And unfortunately, because of their last name, they're able to get like this access to power in the country, and people are willing. I don't even quite honestly. I
reminds me of a current secretary of the HHS with the
Yeah,
name.
exactly. We talk about we don't have royalty in this country, but we kind of do. Like if your name is Trump, Bush, Cuomo, like there's a level of royalty in this country.
Well, there's actually a lot more royalty than people realize because in every state there's royalty. Like
Yeah.
for here, it was the mansions for years. And, what was that one fella from Alabama who was, you'll remember him. He was a Democrat and switched Republican in the '90s.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, I know who you're talking about. I can't remember the name either.
yeah.
Yeah, and down here in Florida, what's his name? The governor is basically trying to set up his wife. DeSantis is trying to set up his wife as the next generation of power here because they want her to run for governor in Florida.
These people never stop.
No, they don't. That's the thing. And that's the thing that I try to get people to realize on the progressive side. Like, they don't stop. I worked for a long time at Media Matters, and like, you see the right wing propaganda machine, they never stop. They don't take days off. And, people on our side think that, we won the election. It's cool now. Everybody relax. It's fun time. You can chill. And it's like, no, they never stop. Like the day after the election, they're
I'm
running the next election.
already sabotaging like Mitch McConnell in the Senate.
Yeah,
On day
yeah,
one.
because they never stop. Like they used to complain about that with Clinton in the '90s. I remember, if you remember back then, they used to accuse Clinton of, oh, he's running a permanent campaign, and what Clinton did was nothing compared to what the average conservative people are doing now. Like Clinton was, a little baby in the woods compared to what the rights machine does.
One of the things I was hopeful for with Harris was I thought, because I mean, the elephant in the room is age here. And it's, even though as you say, some of the younger people are adopting the same sort of tone and stature, excuse me, it's primarily the older generations in power that are acting that way. And one of the reasons I was hopeful about Harris was that she was one of the first people running who her entire adult life Republicans have been insane. Because remember, she came up in the post Pete Wilson California. So Republicans had, been cut to the bone. So the only people left in the Republican Party were all the crazy people. And yeah. And I
So,
was hoping that was a sensibility she would bring with her to the presidency, knowing that they're crazy.
but see, I think this is the problem that she had and that President Obama, frankly, had. They're both they're both a little too optimistic about people. And I'm not saying like you have to kind of be. I'm not saying you have to be a complete pessimist and like think that everyone is the worst thing in the world because that's not really a good way to like operate. Like even I couldn't do that. But it's one thing to be optimistic. It's a whole other thing to think that the Republican Party is going to have, the great revelation, which is sort of the Biden problem and the Harris problem and the Obama problem, is thinking that the crazies are going to be, run out of town by I guess, the less crazies, which is supposed to be, I guess, the George W. Bush faction of the Republican Party at this point. But they're just all crazy. So, and then I mean, I like Vice President Harris, to be perfectly honest. But one of the problems I've always had with her is this level of timidity, right? Like, yeah, I find that she's a very cautious political leader, which can be good because you don't want someone like Trump that's just a complete, psychopath. But by the same token, like, you have to be willing to push the barrier a little bit. And it's harder. Like, it's harder for a woman, it's harder for someone of, person of color. And if you're both, it's really hard. But by the same token, you can't just be super cautious and run around with Liz Cheney all the time and think that you're going to get people enthusiastic and out to vote for you.
Yeah, that's something we keep doing, trying to prove ourselves as worthy as like a handful of Republicans think that's going to help us with Democrats.
Yeah.
They don't care.
Yeah, get people that don't care excited. There's a lot more of them than, safe Republicans out there. That's the problem. Is like there's a lot more people that think that they don't care about politics out there. There's a lot of people that care about politics, but they don't understand that the things they care about are politics. And it's the job of Democratic leaders to convince those people to vote rather than, the cast of Morning Joe who gives a shit.
Are they still on?
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. Oh, yeah. Every morning, if you want your conventional wisdom, you can tune into MSNBC, the quote unquote liberal channel, and get your Morning Joe fix. And that's the safe space. Like, that's where Democratic politicians, I think they love to go on that show more than anything else on television, is to go on Morning Joe. Because that is what people have told them the average Midwestern swing voter cares about is, freaking Joe Scarborough, which is stupid.
God, that hurts both my head and my soul. It's really, really, really awful. What do you think about the younger kids coming up? AOC, Frost, any others that catch your eye?
Oh yeah, I like all of them. I like Ilhan Omar. Like I like them because they're not afraid. They make mistakes, but who gives a crap? And I think that's one of the biggest issues that we have is that we have so many Democratic politicians that think, "Oh my God, if I make a mistake, everything is over." Meanwhile, you've got Donald Trump over there making, mistake after mistake after mistake. People are fine with that.
Not just Donald Trump doesn't just make mistakes. Donald Trump makes what would have ended presidencies kind of mistakes almost every fucking day, and no one flinches.
Right.
And he's so stupid.
But that's the thing I think people on our side of the aisle need to learn is that people I think there was this time period in the late 80s to early 90s where people thought you had to be a perfect person to run for office, And that was, and we saw it kind of come to a head with the whole Clinton Lewinsky scandal. And they're like, see, if we don't have the perfect person that's always perfectly behaved, things are going to blow up in the world. Everything's going to be terrible. And then George W. Bush comes along a few years later and is a complete mess, a disaster. And you don't have to be Johnny Perfect or Jane Perfect. I think, honestly, one of the best examples of that is Joe Biden. Biden ran in 2020, and he made gaffes all the time. And guess what? Nobody cared because he came across as a lot more real than a lot of other Democrats running because people are willing to accept. You don't have to be Barack Obama because there's only going to be one Barack Obama. Like, that's an impossible goal. And that's why I like the young people running in the party right now because they don't care. Maxwell Frost is he's my congressman for my district. And I met him when he was running. He looked like this skinny little kid. He came up and introduced himself to me. I thought, I had a little mind bubble in my head. I'm like, this kid looks like he should be at the high school, not running for Congress. And he's doing a great job because he doesn't give a damn because he's just kind of a YOLO kind of guy. And it comes across as authentic because he is authentic. And I think that's one of the biggest problems in the Democratic Party. They look like a bunch of phonies, and the young folks don't look like phonies. Jasmine Crockett is as real as it gets. AOC is super real, and people love it, and people want reality, even if it's crappy. And I'd rather them have good reality from people like Crockett and AOC than reality from Donald Trump, who's a fucking disaster.
No. Do you think because Republicans have been crazy their entire lives, they don't have any of that
Oh yeah.
expectation to work with them?
Oh yeah, that's a huge part of it. Like all they've known, someone like Maxwell Frost, who's as young as he is, all he's ever known is a completely insane Republican Party. AOC has only ever seen the Republican Party basically of George W. Bush and
I really think that's such a motivator for them too.
yeah, yeah, because they're not tied into this myth of Tipper and Tip O'Neill and and hanging out with Newt Gingrich and like just having a good old time back smoking cigars. And I mean honestly, that's kind of the Joe Biden world, like, that does not exist anymore. The Joe Biden Pelosi world that doesn't exist anymore. Instead, it's these crazies that blew up part of Iraq, killed thousands of people, and now we have like the Trump era Republican Party. Like the young people, they don't know this quote unquote sane Republican Party that theoretically existed when you and I were younger. Like they have no context for it, so they know that they're fighting in a war. And if you're a soldier fighting in a war under those conditions, you're going to do a lot better job than Chuck Schumer, who thinks he can hang out at the gym with his good Republican colleagues all the time.
Oh God, I remember when it was after Russer died, and then Matthews finally stepped aside, and I thought, oh my God, that's got to be the last of the journalists who are going to get like tingling feelings running down their leg because they're talking about Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan sharing a drink, and why can't there be bipartisanship? And I thought it would all go away.
Yeah, I thought so. My version of that was after Obama took over. I thought, okay, we've been through 8 years of Bush. We understand that these guys are always at combat, always at war. So we'll be on a war footing now, right, guys? Right? Right? We're gonna go to war now, and you're not gonna retreat. And then like Obama, God bless him, is the king of the retreaters when it comes to that political combat, because I think one of Obama's fatal flaws is he actually believes the hopey changey stuff, which it's fine. It's aspirational, but then when you're actually in power, you have to be bare knuckle. And I don't think he ever got that. He still doesn't get that. He still thinks that there's good somewhere inside Mitch McConnell's dark heart, and they don't understand that there's nothing there. It's coal.
Yeah, and right now, I mean, locally, I don't know if you know how dire it is here, but like, I want to say 32 of the 34 state senators are Republican, and I think it's something like 94 or 95 of the 100 members of the House of Delegates are Republicans. So there's like maybe 8 elected Democrats statewide in West Virginia. And it'd be so nice to have more of them out there right now in all these areas that are flooded and aren't getting any help and aren't getting anything from the governor and aren't going to get anything from FEMA, and say, look, you voted 70% for this. This is, this is not how it's supposed to work. But we just don't have anybody to even do it.
Yeah, but see, I think in states like that, and down here in Florida, it's not as dire, but it's pretty bad too. One of the things that is needed is investment in media, right? And so, because like years ago, there were states that were, so-called swing states. And what Republicans have done really intelligently is invest in media to convert. And that's part of their conversion process, because they know that like converting these areas.
You've watched it how many times? I mean,
Yeah.
Remember, I used to work at Red State before they were bought out and became part of the puke funnel. Remember when I was a Republican, I was writing there for years with Josh Trevino and Eric Erickson. Whatever happened to those guys? And what's his name? The plagiarist from the
Ben Dominic.
Meghan McCain's husband.
Yeah. Mr. Megan McCain.
Yeah, they've been doing that for years. I mean, how many times did you see, like, just even back when it was, remember blog ads and Blogger?
Yeah.
Republicans always had blog feeds that were just jam packed with candidate ads because they shared the love. They spent all sorts of money on advertising, and they built it from the ground up. Remember, what was Michelle Malkin's site that got bought out
Hot
by?
air. Yeah. Yeah, and they've done that, and the thing is, the Democrats did it for a little bit, as I'm sure you remember, like 2004, 2006 ish, and then after Obama won, and that's the problem. They view things in campaign cycles on the Democratic side. Republicans are in a war. Democrats want to win a series of campaigns, right? And Republicans are like, we want to win a war. And if you look at any victorious army in the past, you don't just like look at battles, you look at the entire war, and you're like, we want to control all of these territories, so what we need to do is assemble an army. And it's not just Rupert Murdoch, but of course Rupert Murdoch's a big part of it, but you also have your little militias basically all over the place, your local newspapers, your Sinclairs, your red states, your right-wing radio, your right-wing blog, and they're like, let's just throw money at it. Most of it's going to fail. Most of it's going to like completely, suck. It's going to be terrible. It's going to be controversies and, conspiracy theorists and whatever. We don't care. We're just going to keep throwing money at it because it's going to pay off. And it has paid off for them. Meanwhile, Democrats did Air America once and then say, it didn't work. Let's not invest in progressive media ever again. Or if we do, let's invest in these projects that are so constrained, so like, targeting on winning like soccer moms in Midwestern Ohio.
Oh,
And
they're so terrified of offending someone.
right, which is stupid. And again, this goes to what the young people in the Democratic Party, they're not afraid of offending people. They're not afraid of swearing and being advocates. Like I said, like Maxwell Frost, he was part of the anti-gun violence movement. Well, those guys, they know the NRA, you have to get radical, you have to go scream in their faces to get anything. So now he's taking that same kind of energy to Congress. And, yeah, you have some senators and members of Congress that are going to, oh my God, I can't believe he said that. That's not the approved talking point. Meanwhile, regular, normal ass people that don't, follow politics day to day like you and I do, they'll notice, oh, that young guy, he said something. Oh, he's my congressman. That's cool. I like that. He's a Democrat. Like, people don't even understand that, like, they're Democrats, right? You have to explain to them, this guy that you like is a Democrat. Now go vote for the other Democrats like him so they can scream at the bad guys for you. It's
Just the
fundamental level.
timidity of it all is just, we're afraid of offending even one person. And Mike Lee's out there live tweeting fucking dead body
Yeah.
jokes after 2 Minnesota politicians get executed.
It's like, what has the respectful stuff really gotten liberals and progressives and Democrats over the last 30 years, right?
Well,
Like,
I'll tell you what it's gotten them. It's gotten them a different standard in the media that
oh yeah,
they're held to.
oh yeah.
That's all. The only thing that's developed over the 30 years is that there's a double standard in how Democrats are treated.
But even then, I think people need to understand that when the New York Times gets upset about something, nobody cares, right? That's the thing. Like, if people are worried about, oh, there's going to be a media pylon, just do like Trump. Don't care. Don't care about it. It doesn't matter. Look at all the stuff that they've thrown at AOC, right? And what does she just do? She just, whatever. I've got my constituents. I keep winning my races. People around the country, love and support her. And that's true of, people like Crockett, the others that have been speaking out, Al Green, someone like that. They just don't care. And they understand. This is the thing that I always say we should steal from the Republicans. They don't give a damn. And people, that sells a lot more than being the safe guy that supposedly the polls say that people like, even though when you actually ask people, do you like the really practiced, polished guys, they're like, I don't really like them that much. They come across as phonies. They don't seem authentic.
The thing that's upsetting too is a lot of the the guys that we're talking about can do it. They can do what you're talking about, and you watch them sometimes do it in elections, and then as soon as they get into the office, they just turn into like Ruben Gallego is one of them, or
Yeah.
Adam Schiff is another one. We actually even had him on a several book clubs on Balloon Juice, hosted with like hundreds of people for Zooms when he released his book. And then he gets in office and he just turns into this machine guy.
Yeah, that was one of the things, honestly, back in 2007, 2008, I was afraid of with Obama, right? Like I was a big, Obama supporter back then. And I remember when he was running against Hillary, and a lot of people were like, okay, well, he has this momentum now, but maybe he can just like go to the Senate and learn the ropes and understand how things operate. And then after a couple terms, then maybe he can run for president. And I was like, I'm running screaming, please, God, no, run right now before they get to you, before they, suck out your personality. To me, it's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers when you go to, especially the Senate. I think the Senate is the worst place for that kind of thing. You go to the Senate and you have these like really great people, and within a couple years they come out talking like automatons, and they're talking about, I passed an amendment to the bill that it was attached to the writer. They sound like, I mean, God love them, but they sound like John Kerry, right?
Right.
They sound like they had their soul sucked out of them. And people, I think, that are entrenched in politics.
What were they giving to the people in Brave New World? Soma.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
Soma.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the people that are in politics for too long don't understand, to normal, regular people that do not follow politics, that stuff sucks. They don't want to hear that. And look at the most recent election winners, and I think it tells you that. He sucks. He's the one of the worst people, if not the worst person on the planet. But Donald Trump was not in that mold, whether within the Republican Party or in the general election. And to a lot of people, he was exciting. It's stupid and it's racist and it's bigoted excitement, but it's exciting. And the other person like that was Barack Obama, right? He was exciting. He was not in the same mold as, Hillary Clinton and John Kerry and Al Gore. It was very different. And not just because he was a black man, but because he produced this excitement, and people want excitement, and we can't pretend that that's not the world that we live in now. You have to be exciting. So I would rather people be exciting in service of good things than being a fascist Nazi.
Right. Oh my goodness. So many things to talk about. Well, I'm wondering if we can pull it all together before the midterms. I'm very concerned about, God, I can't remember his name because he's not Ben Wetler, the DNC chair. Martin.
Ken Martin. Yeah.
Where is he? What's
Yeah.
he doing?
Yeah. I mean, again, it's another, to me, it's another, I actually I don't think that things would be, I'm not sure, but I don't think that things would be super different if Wickler had won, because there's only so much you can do as DNC chair. I mean, you can direct where money is spent, and you can decide on, grassroots organizing, but ideologically, to me, DNC chair is not going to be that guy. Because like even when it was Howard Dean as DNC chair, he wasn't running the ideology. It's whether you can run the nuts and bolts. And like, I mean, there's an honest question as to whether he's able to even do that part of it. Like at least Wickler, in his home state is able to do that. I don't know about the current guy. But as far as the midterms, I'll say it this way. I'm honestly more concerned. I mean, I want the Democrats, of course, to take back control of things, but I am concerned about what they will take away if that happens, right? Like, I obviously prefer it to Republicans just going, apeshit like they have, but I'm worried about what their takeaway will be if they take back control, because that will tell them that everything they've been doing since election night was on the right path, and it's not. It's to me, it's like what happened with Bush. Like, Republicans are shooting themselves in the foot. It's not anything that the Democrats have done. If any, Democrats have enabled them. Like, they keep voting for their nominee.
What's his name? Carville strategy. Sit back and
Yeah.
wait for them to trip on their dicks.
Yeah, exactly. It's in a, like, and yes, they are tripping over their dicks, but like, that shouldn't be the reason why you win an election. Like, you should be winning an election by making an affirmative case. Number one, that your stuff is better. Number two, these psychopaths should never be allowed in their power ever again in their lives. Like, they shouldn't even be able to smell power, let alone be in positions of power. Like, those are the things that they should be hitting, and not like voting for, voting for little Marco to be Secretary of State. They all voted for him to be Secretary of State. And I keep pointing that out on my social media to people. Like, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Chuck Schumer were united in voting for Marco Rubio to be Secretary of State. Yeah, and that tells me that there's a mindset problem. And if they win, which is actually the good outcome, but if they win, it'll validate this stance in their heads. And so that's the part I'm worried about. And I'm just like, I don't know how to deal with the permutations of it, because I'm like, I want them to do better politically, but also if they do better politically, it's going to force them to suck.
Sometimes you just want to slap them.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not a fan of physical violence, but sometimes you see them and you're like, one of the main things I've seen with them over the years is when I see them talk, and it's very clearly a recitation of a talking point. And I'm just like, talk like a human being, please. I see Jeffrey talk, and I'm just like, please talk like a normal human being. I'm sure you're capable. You don't talk to your family members like this. But instead, he does these halting statements like this. And it's like, no one talks like that. Be a human being.
But you were talking earlier about how nobody cares about their statements from the podium, and while I've been thinking about it, you know what? I just turn away when I see them gathered at the podium, because I don't want to watch that, and I'm compulsive about this stuff. If anything interesting happens, I'll see a clip of it pop up somewhere.
Right. You have to talk trash, right? And that's, your audience probably may not know. Like, I have this whole professional wrestling theory of how politics.
Oh yeah, UFC and professional wrestling and Donald Trump and Joe Rogan.
Yeah, and you can do this in this is the thing people, I think, don't get sometimes. You can do this in service of good things. Like, some of the most popular wrestling characters are the quote unquote the faces, the good guys, right? And you talk trash about the domineering authority figure. Like, one of the most popular wrestlers of all time is Stone Cold Steve Austin. And the way he got there was talking trash about, at the time, Vince McMahon, who was running WWE. He was seen as the billionaire, scold authority figure. Well, and then you get the audience riled up. Well, I'm always watching politics. And I'm like, these guys are the bad guys. Get riled up about the bad guys. Like, these guys are cutting healthcare. Talk trash about it. All right, calm down.
Well, I think this is as good a time as any. We're at about 35 minutes. Let's call it a wrap on this, and we'd like to have you back. Are you up for another one?
Yeah, sure, anytime.
Excellent. Well, thanks for listening in, guys. I'm only shutting this down because the producers yelled at me the last time for going forever. But we're at 35 minutes, and I hope you enjoyed listening to Oliver and Kal-El talk about what's the word I want to use? Well, nobody watches this, so I won't get hate mail anyway. The deplorable state of the Democratic Party, which is just sad.
The current crisis, I call it.
Goodbye, Kal-El.